Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the In the 11 podcast. I'm your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the show where we bring on those from the world of football to show you what it takes to be in the 11 at the highest possible level. This week's guest is kicking off a bit of a mini-series that we're going to do on the podcast here with the staff of Beestera Soccer Training. So first up, we have James Beeston, one of the co-founders of Beestera. If you're a longtime listener of the show, you remember him from way back in the early days of the podcast, and it's been great to have him back on again, sharing kind of everything that's happened in the past couple of years, navigating the pandemic, navigating the growth of Beestera, and we dive into all of that because so much has changed since we last spoke, and it's cool to kind of document that here on the pod. So I can't wait to kick you over to myself and Beast's conversation. Before I do that, though, I have some exciting news. I mentioned to you last episode, I'm going to mention to you again. You know, a lot of you have reached out to me over the course of this podcast and seeking advice when it comes to the professional world of football and sort of what it takes to be to the next level. As a player and a coach now who has played nearly every level collegiately, coached almost every level collegiately, and been able to play in multiple stints overseas, I feel like I'm in a position where I can really offer valuable insight and advice to those who are trying to navigate the college soccer process or beyond college soccer. And if I don't have the information, then surely I've talked to somebody over the course of this podcast, over the course of my career, that does have the information. And so what I am offering is career coaching consultancy services. So what I would encourage you to do, if you are someone who is navigating the college soccer process, or you're navigating beyond the college soccer process, or you're navigating the coaching world, whatever it may be, if you want to get involved in football in some way, I would encourage you to take a look at the link down below and schedule a call with me. And we'll get to talk a little bit about what your goals are, what you're thinking, and hopefully I can be able to provide some insight and value to you. So I'm really looking forward to connecting with all of you out there. I can't wait to see you guys on the calls. So without further ado, here's myself and James. For a second time, one of the very first guests that we ever had on the podcast. So I'm extremely grateful to have him back on all these years later. James Beeston, welcome back, my friend.
Thanks for having me. Long-awaited return.
I know, the long-awaited return. So in the first episode, we sort of dove into your background, your upbringing with the game, how you sort of made your way to America. So I'd encourage anyone who's interested in that sort of story of James to go back and listen to that episode. I think you're going to have to go all the way back to 18, I believe, is your first episode, which is crazy. It's like over 100 episodes ago. A lot has changed for both of us in those couple of years. Man, I mean, where do we begin over the course of the past 3 years and what's been changing with you and Beestera and everything?
So I've just actually listened to that episode on the car drive down here.
Really?
And I had to scroll back to November 2020. Which obviously was a difficult year, an interesting year for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Just to understand the headspace that I was in personally and where the business was at, where you were at. So we'd literally just done a training session where you were getting ready to play overseas.
Yep.
So to listen back to that, it was good to know how much growth has happened between us and yourself as well, from a playing perspective, a personal perspective too.
Yeah.
For us, obviously you're on the other side now as a staff member. So the business itself has definitely expanded into different avenues, and we are fortunate to have brought on so many good people into the business to make sure one of the issues that we found in the first kind of discussion was, if we need to grow, we need to bring on the right people to maintain the quality. So thankfully, myself, Matt, and Mike have managed to find the people, and the business has attracted a certain caliber of person that propelled the business forward. So again, building the relationships with the people that we've managed to bring on and let them flourish in whatever their aspirations are has been really important in the 3 years since we last did this.
Yeah. It sounds to me, and especially speaking to other people on staff, that's been a really integral part of what's allowed Beestera to grow kind of to where it is today. I mean, would you agree with that, or would you point to any other factors that have really allowed you to kind of blossom into the company, the organization, the culture that you have at present?
It's all down to the people. Honestly, like the staff members that we brought on, yourself, Curtis, Tucker, Josh, Lane in a videographer capacity, like the part-time staff feel full-time as well because they want to be a part of it consistently. The fact that we had an office, we've got an office now, and we got that on Labor Day of last year. That's been huge in terms of meeting of the minds, collaboration, getting things done 10x in terms of time. That's been huge, but I think it just comes down to the people. So
yeah. Excuse me. Are there, you mentioned the office as one. I'm curious, are there any moments kind of along this journey, whether it be in totality from the start, the inception of Beestera, or, even within the last couple of years since we last spoke? Because it's, I know we've spoken about this before. There's these big drastic changes when it comes to what Beestera has been. When it started in the early years, it was you and Mike, and so much of it was just kind of figuring things out on the fly. We're training kids, we're doing a camp, and we're figuring it out. And now it's like, you have an office, and you have staff, and you have all these different things in place. Are there moments at all that you ever take stock and kind of think, this is a little bit surreal, that like I've not only that I'm in this, but I've built this?
I think the fact that we are constantly foot down on the pedal every day, it's difficult to kind of take a couple of steps back and see what's being built. But the rate at which we're going now, and kind of feeding the fuel to the staff members and seeing them come into the office every day, and there's a buzz in the office where we're building something really special. The daily constant pursuit of trying to get things done.
Yeah.
It's tough to take, like I said, it's tough to take those couple of steps back, to be honest. But I think we will take a couple of steps back one day and say, oh, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But right now it's like, let's go. Let's just go with it.
But I think I was speaking to Curtis a bit about this, or maybe even some of the new coaches. Like, it was interesting for me to talk to Richie yesterday, who's one of the new coaches that we brought on. And like, just, as the funny sort of a side note, in the way in which we run our sessions, where you'll text everything out, and it's sort of, to the non-Beestera person, they read that text message of the way in which we set up our sessions, and they would think it's like hieroglyphics, because there's all these different letters and names and things like that. And Richie is looking at me, and he's like, so who am I coaching and when? Yeah. And I'm explaining, and like me and Tucker, we've just seen it so many times that we understand it, but to the new person, they don't. And it made me start to think, as I was speaking to him, like, now with the way in which you bring on a new coach, the way in which, you and I had an evaluation this past week of my coaching, and like, to see that evolution and that growth, I think is almost maybe a moment of, documenting that sort of growth and where you've established yourself now as a company, because it felt like in the beginning, everything was just like, go, go, go. Like, we're growing, we're building, how much can we expand? And now there's still that sense, from my perspective as a staff member, but there's also a sense of like, okay, how do we also perfect sort of everything that we've already established? Like, I wonder too, if that's been a conscious thought for you about sort of, we've grown to a stage, but I also need to sort of protect and develop what I've already established.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on with quality control. And before we really expand, like, the foundation needs to be set of onboarding coaches.
Yeah.
Like I said, you're only as good as the people around you. The coaches that we employ are representing your brand. So how we onboard new coaches has really been front of mind over the past 6 months, and developing, the onboarding process, how they get interviewed, they do observation work, they co-coach, they lead, their final assessment is videoed with mic'd up, we go over that, and then they're either offered a position or not.
Mm-hmm.
That's for new coaches. I think I did a disservice to the coaches currently doing private sessions with us, such as yourself, because it was a case of, you're a good player, you're a nice person, you can come and coach, let's go. And you kind of learn through osmosis of being around me and Matt, who've been doing it for a long time, and it's you picking up on certain things without the direction from us. So a big part of the next phase for us is making sure that quality control is set, not only with the current staff members, but with anyone else that we bring on. So we know if we want to expand into a new region and we want to send a coach that has been onboarded under the current premises that we work with, we know they are Beestera certified. They know their job. They know what we represent as well.
So it's funny, and again, I'll tie this back to this conversation with Richie yesterday, where I almost look at it as it's something that has helped my coaching career, and I don't necessarily look at it as a disservice. And it's to no fault of your own. It's honestly, I feel like it's been a product of my coaching career as a whole. Everything, I think a lot of us have this idea of what coaching is going to be when we go into it, and then you fast forward to all of a sudden, you show up at a camp somewhere and somebody says, "Hey, can you run this session?" And 100 kids come over to you, and you have 4 balls, and that's sort of what I feel like that true essence of coaching is. And so, like, I was even telling him yesterday about how, so much of what we do is adapting, and it's adapting on the fly. Because he was saying, I know how to do this session for 1 player. I can't really figure out how I want to do it for 2 or 3. And I'm like, it's gonna take time, but you're gonna be able to get there. And it's a huge part of what we do, because sometimes you can almost do a completely different session when you add 1 more player. And, I mentioned too the Pinot and Bean group. I was like, "Do you know Pinot and Bean?" He's like, "Oh, I don't think I've worked with them yet." I was like, we used to, in the summer at certain points, James would just write down Pinot and Bean group. And that meant you could have 4 players, you could have 12 players. And he was like, "Man, that must be so hard. How did you plan for that?" And you were like, I don't know. Truly, like, it's adapting on the fly. And I think I completely resonate with what you're saying, that it's like, now you're in this position where you can sort of incubate the coaches that you already have. But it was such a huge element of my growth, and being part of Beestera was like, you kind of never knew what you were going to have on a day-to-day basis. And that, like, it forced you to adapt, it forced you to grow quickly and put you in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, it's a huge part of, especially what we do, as you said. Shout out to Pete, by the way, for getting the groups together. Again, it could be 2 players in the session, it could be 22 players in the session, and it's understanding, right, if I plan for a session of 4, I can just double that if there's 8. Or it is finding certain techniques, and that's what I feel is the next stage of my personal development as a coach, is being able to assess coaches, being able to give them an action plan of things that they can work on without sounding condescending. I'm very, as I said in our assessment the other day, this is uncomfortable for me. It's pushing myself out of the comfort zone to kind of evaluate and observe coaches on current staff is difficult, but very aware that how I give information to our current staff members is very relatable to how I give information to players. So I'm not going to give you 10 things that you need to improve. I'm going to give you 1 or 2 things that we can work on, and that will unlock a new level, and so on and so forth, and rinse and repeat. So I've enjoyed the past couple of weeks really observing every coach on staff in our sessions and seeing what they do, how they adapt, and with a view to tweaking something to making sure it is Beestera relevant, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so how do you sort of establish, I guess, the balance in your workflow when it's, because I think you're in this unique position that a lot of the staff isn't, where you sort of are wearing the hat of, I'm trying to drive the business forward, I'm trying to drive the evaluation of coaches and my staff forward, and also too, there's still a level of like, I'm trying to sort of hone my craft as a coach, and what's the balance that you strike in terms of, you know, all those different things?
It's understanding and being self-aware on your time and how you invest that time and how you spend that time. So I live 30 minutes away from where we do sessions.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of me listening to music for those 30 minutes, I try and use it for self-development, whether that's business, whether that's coaching. So listening to that is, I know I can get an hour a day of personal development from audiobooks, from podcasts such as this. Then it's figuring out what is the priority right now. It's very seasonal, our businesses. So currently we're just announcing locations for camps for 2024 summer season. So whatever Mike needs right now, I'm fully focused on that. Because if we look at it from a business perspective, camps is our biggest source of revenue. So whatever Mike needs for camps, that has to be the priority. Then it comes down to your list of priorities. What's next? I always feel guilty if I'm not coaching, because I feel as though people could look at me and go, well, he's not doing any work anymore. And that is something that I'm really battling every day. I always try and make sure I put myself on working the most, coaching the most, but I shouldn't, because I could be using that time to observe coaches to make sure, again, quality control. So there's that. And then there's also the online stuff that we're trying to build out as well, which, again, if it's done right and properly, it's something that could allow more opportunities for current staff members or people to come on board in a bigger capacity. So it's figuring out what is needed right now and work down the priority list through that, really.
Yeah. I like that you've also mentioned Mike there as well. There's something that Curtis and I were talking about yesterday. Like, again, maybe because of the way in which you move and the way in which Beestera moves, there's not a moment to stop and think about this. But I think you, Matt, and Mike have such an interesting dynamic in the way the three of you sort of complement each other when it comes to strengths. And I'm wondering if you've ever sort of thought about that as a factor that has led to some of the success of Beestera. Like, I think, you know, you have a very detail oriented and process focused way in which you go about your work, and there's also a bit of a creativity that you bring to it, and Matt is sort of able to provide structure to so many things and set the framework for how everything's going to move forward. And I think Mike is one of a kind in his work ethic. I've seen few people work the way he does and build and expand and be willing to take risks. And you know, you'll hear it when Curtis and I spoke yesterday, but it's like, it is fascinating to see the three of you sort of operate at this high level. And I wonder if that's rare for businesses to cultivate that.
I think it's really rare. I've not been around many businesses and know the ins and outs of it. But in terms of the relationship between us three, each one knows our own lane, and we know what we bring and we know what we don't bring. So
self-awareness is powerful.
Self-awareness is very powerful. So classic case, at 8 a.m. this morning, Mike sent an email and I looked at it. Did you see it?
No.
I looked at it at 8:10. I sent a message to our group chat to say, Mike, I've built a template out for any future emails that you want to send. Just use that as a template. And he replied with, you're so nice, letting me know I've done a bad job in the nicest way possible. But it's things like that. It's like, if you want something designed, I would love for it to go through me. It needs to go through me.
So he sent this out to, like,
the email list.
Oh.
Yes. The email list. So with the yellow background,
Yep.
text that isn't our usual text that we use.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike is a like you said, one of a kind. He is work ethic wise. He's never off. He's always on, which is a blessing and a curse.
Mm.
When he wants something done, he can't wait a couple of days. It needs to be done now. Like we can just do it now, because his response would be, well, they're getting the information all the same. So the links work.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares about the design, essentially? And he's right, because the information's I'm not changing any text.
Yeah.
I'm just changing the way it looks a little bit. So as long as people click on that link and they want to sign up, that's great. But obviously then it comes down to my side and the design, the creativity, and how I want Beestera to be portrayed throughout. And Matt is the kind of, as you said, provides the framework for Mike as a risk taker, me as a creative, and have some ideas, and he's the logical guy. So I'd say out of us three, Mike is the biggest risk taker.
Mm-hmm.
Matt is safe, and I fall somewhere in the middle. So I, most of the time, tip the balance in favor of.
Ah, interesting. Okay. So you're sort of the deciding factor when it comes to...
For the most part,
because I mean, in a group of three, there's always going to be one, right?
For the most part, we agree on everything. I tend to side with Mike, but Matt, we always say he's like the father figure. He kind of has final say. So that's kind
Funnily, and I know these people probably don't know this as well. Matt also being the younger one makes this the funniest part of this whole scenario. Yeah.
Like, I feel guilty if we place an order and I'm like, can I use the credit card? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's to that point, and like, I have to get permission from him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've said this many a times, if we didn't bring Matt on board, we would nowhere near be in the position that we're currently in. He was the first person out of the three to say, we need systems and processes if we want to scale and expand this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that we're currently building, we've kind of done it reverse order. If we were to start over again, we'd start with the systems that need to be built now that we're currently doing. But it's tough to understand what needs to be built unless you've actually gone through all of the things that, you know, like case in point, it used to take me an hour to trace around an outline of someone to remove the background in Photoshop. Now you just go into Canva, click background remover, and it's done in a second. So then how are you utilizing your time? And yeah, it's crazy, like the systems that you can build out now.
Yeah. As you talk about even to some of the, the disagreements that you've had amongst the three over the years, and I'm sure it's been such a interesting process for the three of you as business owners and growers of this business, but also being as friends. You don't have to necessarily speak to disagreements, but maybe if there's anything that stands out to you in terms of a moment of kind of adversity that you faced within the growth of Beestera, or a setback that you remember in the process. I'm sure that we've all made mistakes through this journey, but is there anything that really stands out to you and maybe how you overcame it?
I don't think you'd be surprised when I say we don't disagree. We don't really argue. Our significant others notice that as well. Like, they've never heard us argue or raise our voices in any way. I think the biggest moments, and again, this ties into the character of each person, is summer of 2020 with COVID. And me and Matt are going, can we do summer camps? We can't do summer camps. And Mike's like, yeah, of course we can. We'll get masks. We'll get the temperature check. We'll do this. We'll do that. Hand sanitizers. Make sure coaches are trained into maintaining social distancing. Adhere to all the safety procedures. If it was down to me, I'd have probably gone,
too big
no,
of a
not
risk,
this year.
yeah.
too big of a risk. But on reflection, if we hadn't have done that and we hadn't have generated revenue through 2020 summer camps, we wouldn't have been able to bring on the staff members that have allowed us to grow even more. So again, it's kind of the risk versus the reward. If it was down to me, I'd probably wouldn't have risked that, but Mike did, and he made sure he adhered to every health and safety policy that was representative of the state, and it was a great summer. So that's the biggest thing that stands out for me in terms of how big it would have impacted the business.
Yeah. What has it been like to see the evolution of camps in Beestera? I mean, as someone who has seen it, has worked them, has also has heard the stories of you saying our first ever camp was 8 kids in a Brunswick field, to now, be announcing that you're in, is it 12 states this year or 8 states? Or
we're in 6 different states. We've introduced residential camps. We've got a camp in Florida, looking at Maryland. Been voted the #1 Nike soccer camp in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is all down to Mike Natera, and a large part into the camp directors that he's employed to take on different regions. So, sometimes we've got 6 or 7 camps going on a week. So the likes of Josh Binfield, Devon, Drew, Blake, Chris, the local camp directors that have allowed Mike that free time so he can plan and make sure. A lot of people, when they see camps, they think, it's easy. You just get, the field, you get the equipment, and you get maybe a curriculum for your coaches. If you've got 4, 5, 6 camps on a week at different locations, think about transporting that equipment, sizing T-shirts. Mike does coloured T-shirts for World Cup Day. So each camper will receive a different coloured shirt. Then you have the health and safety procedures for a residential camp. When you're in charge of 100 people, 100 kids for 4 nights and days, the health and safety protocol is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many different things, so many different hats that he has to wear with camp. It's just mind-boggling for me just how he's gone through that. Because, again, his work ethic is unparalleled. I couldn't do that. I really couldn't do that, nor I wouldn't have the interest to do that. So I think that speaks again into the different skill sets that each staff member has and how we can kind of double down on the strengths rather than focus on the weaknesses. So we say this sometimes to the players too. If you've got a strength, you'd want to double down on that strength because it's more enjoyable to double down on a strength than to focus on a weakness.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, I love marketing. I'd want to double down on getting better at creating videos or flyers or whatever that needs to be rather than creating an Excel spreadsheet for camp. I don't have any passion or desire. It is a weakness.
But you have someone who does.
But I have someone that does have a passion for that. So it's figuring out your skill sets, being self-aware, and how that fits into the overall structure of the business too.
Yeah. It's so funny that you just mentioned this is an unrelated story to what we're talking about, but kind of ties in. I track also, whenever I go work for Beestera, and there was like a discrepancy on an hours or something. So I texted Matt, and he goes, "Yeah, just send me over what you have." And I send it to him, and immediately he writes back, "Your spreadsheet is like giving me anxiety. Like, what am I looking at here?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's just like 2 or 3 columns. I'm just trying to track the hours." He's like, "Okay, do you mind if I like change it?" And I'm like, "Whatever you need to do, man. Like, go right ahead." But I get again, it speaks to like the self-awareness. It speaks to kind of the superpowers that each of you possess, and it's this perfect sort of like balance of things where so many times in a business, especially an entrepreneurial venture, it's like you have to wear all the hats, even the hats that you really don't like wearing. And now you kind of get to be in a point where, sure, there's still obviously things that you probably do on a week-to-week basis that aren't your favorite tasks, but there are other people that love to do that task that you can't stand.
Yeah, I mean, if it was down to me, I'd probably still be tracking things on a pen and paper. and that just shows like it's just not sustainable. But yeah, it's again, and it's not just. I don't want to just say it's just me, Matt, and Mike. I think it's every staff member that brings on a certain skill set that is very complementary of the business.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at everyone that's on board, we're all trying to have the same mission, and we all have the same kind of principles, but enjoyment and skill sets are varied, but they're very collaborative too.
Mm.
So.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, definitely speaking to Curtis about this yesterday, and I even told him, and I'm sure you guys have all told him this a bunch, like I think he's been a huge asset in terms of what, I mean, from an outside perspective, he sort of seems to be pushing towards that sort of Mount Rushmore of what Beestera has become, right? Because what he's been able to do in terms of taking team training to another level in this area, I think has been really impressive for me to see. I'm sure for you guys to see as well. And all your staff. I mean, now being able to have Josh on full time, it's going to be amazing to see what he brings into the fold. Tucker has been consistent and producing amazing things for what you guys have done. Like
Tucker's utility. Tucker, you'd be surprised at how many skill sets Tucker possesses.
He told me recently that he was one of the few that you allow to sometimes dive into the design work.
Yeah. I'm
very
picky.
Whenever Curtis puts his hand up for that, you're like, let's see if Tucker's available.
Yeah. Tucker can do a lot of good things. He can do. Matt will let him touch spreadsheets. Wow. I will let him touch design. Mike will let him do futsal. Like he's utility. So again, it comes down to when you're a player. It's like, do you want to be known as the utility, or do you want to really double down on a certain skill set that you possess? And I think he's trying to figure that out now for his journey.
Yeah. I think it's been the hugest thing in my career as a player, probably even now it's probably bled into my, post-playing career as well. Like I do this podcast, I coach, and I haven't yet decided if it's like, because I think at some point I will have to sort of pick a lane to an extent to really grow within one aspect of my professional development. But yeah, it's really been, I've been a utility man for a long time in so many different ways. So I'm just so accustomed to wearing a lot of different hats. And so I can resonate with that with Tucker.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is, if you decide to pick something to go down, you can always pivot and try a different thing and throw your all into that as well. So it is just about, again, I think it always just comes down to self-awareness. The older that you get and the more experience that you get in certain avenues of life, it's figuring out, okay, I want to do more of this, less of this. Is it giving me purpose? Can I master this? Am I looking to master this? Is there ways that I can grow this, so on and so forth? So again, it comes down to being self-aware of what you possess and what you want to achieve.
Speaking about that word of pivoting, right? Has there been, whether it be with Beestera as a whole, was there ever a thought for you of, I don't know if this is feeling quite right for me, I want to pivot away from it, or even in the context of you really were pushing kind of one thing in terms of the growth of Beestera and then sort of pivoted away to pursue a different venture?
Yeah, we tried a couple of different things. I know last conversation on the podcast, we spoke about the launch of Beestera Sports with Beestera Futsal. That didn't come to fruition, really. Billy, the football coach that we brought on, he found a different purpose. And again, there's no ill feelings there. It's like, once you find something you're happy with it, just pursue that. So we pivoted on that. Another thing that we've pivoted on recently is a college recruiting. I thought we could be very influential in terms of educating parents and players into the college recruiting process. And it didn't work out how we planned. But that's not to say it's done and dusted. It's just everything's been built. It's just on the back burner right now. And it's
what was different about it than kind of what you anticipated?
The amount of people interested. I just felt as though we've got a product here that can educate from a club neutral standpoint. we had an outside person who did it full time. So she was fantastic in coming in and making these presentations. And we did a couple of webinars, in person and online. But it just didn't take off how we anticipated. So who knows? Again, it's something to revisit in the future. But again, the bigger the business gets, the more difficult it is to pivot or find different avenues. So we didn't do college recruiting. Okay, we started futsal. Futsal has over 100 players now, and we only really started that in terms of teams this year. So to have 100 players within the futsal team, from different age groups has been huge. And again, it's giving opportunities to people such as Carlos, who has a passion for futsal, into their passion and giving them an opportunity to pursue that too.
I think another unique thing about Beestera is you talk a little bit there about whether it be college recruiting, kind of the club neutral aspect as well, is it feels as if the culture around Beestera and the way in which you approach the game is very different to whether it be the culture in the area or the sort of overall culture of youth sports and youth soccer in general across the country. There's a much less of a tone of politics and sort of, I mean, you and I both know this. Some of the stories that we hear from parents and from players and from other coaches, you really have to sort of take a step back and think, hang on a minute, we're coaching 10-year-old kids how to play soccer. Like, how are we having this conversation about how you watched your coach say this to your kid and then ousted them from the team and they could never, like, and then these parents are fighting. It's truly like the stuff that you feel like you should be watching on your TV. And so it's always been unique for me, especially going away at certain points in my career and then coming back to it. It's just like, oh, Beestera doesn't really do things the same way that the rest of the soccer community does. And I think I'm trying to formulate what my question is about it, but it's just been fascinating for me. And I would say it feels as if maybe it's something that you've devoted and really tried to establish in your culture, but also there's kind of a part of me that just feels like this is the way that you guys are. You just are so uninterested and unbothered in the sort of political frenzy that takes place within the game.
Yeah, I've been in this area for 13 years now with a brief stint in Alabama, but so I can only speak to one or two areas. I didn't see any politics in England when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
One, because it wasn't a pay-to-play model. Two, times have changed. So I guarantee there's politics in England right now.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, just like we're talking about soccer at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I know I try and be so detailed with what we're teaching and how we're teaching it, but you know, we're not building rockets. We're coaching soccer. So the game can bring out life skills that can help people achieve whatever they want to achieve, whatever skill sets that, and I keep mentioning this skill sets, but I truly believe everyone has a special skill set. And luckily for us, the game of soccer allows them to build certain traits and skill sets that's going to serve them well. If they want to play pro, it's hard. Mm-hmm. If they want to play in college, it's hard. But at least you've, one, dealt with adversity. At least you've gone through and you might have dealt with difficult people. You might have peaks of confidence followed by utter
valleys of the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like the game can bring out so many things that's going to serve you well in later life.
Mm-hmm.
So in the grand scheme of things, my Johnny isn't playing on Saturday and he's 8 years old. Okay, well, tell them to persevere and stick it out. Don't go switching clubs and thinking the grass is greener. The amount of people, parents that come to us and say, what club would you recommend? And I'm like, listen, we're club neutral. We built this based on the trust from every director within the area to not badmouth the club.
Mm-hmm.
So go to a place where at the tryout, the kid enjoys the coach. They like the environment that they're currently in. Do they have friends there? Do they want to pursue that? What quality of competition are they playing in? There's so many different factors, and for us to make a cookie cutter statement of saying like the kid has to have this, this, and this,
Yeah.
it comes down to a couple of things, in my opinion. And I'm getting to the age now where hopefully start to have kids of my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I always ask the question now of, if I had a kid, what would I do? Are they enjoying the environment they're currently in? Yes. Great. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about soccer.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked about it here, but one of my favorite episodes that I've done, which is more so personally for me, is I've had twice on a guy named Seth Allen Taylor, who works with high level professionals in terms of their mental health, their sports psychology, also does a lot of work in terms of, I believe just came out with a book sort of discussing the process of being a parent of a youth sport. And it's just so fascinating to hear. I mean, we obviously know this because we see it, and he's told stories as well about some of the things that he sees parents do, but really kind of, because I think it's partially the coach, it's partially the kids' approach to the game, but it's so much of it is with the parents as well. And these kids sort of, they create these feedback loops that they get from their parents. And some of them can be really detrimental to the way a kid perceives themselves, the way a kid perceives themselves within sport, right? Because you sort of create this dynamic in which players are receiving, our kids are receiving the love, the sort of attention, their needs are being met only in the context of sport sometimes. And then even too, sometimes only within the context of sport when you're performing well. And so you constantly have these kids. I mean, we've talked about it before. How many kids do we have that train with Beestera where all of a sudden when dad's on the sideline, the session completely shifts. They've looked at every single, mistake that they've made. They've looked at dad or they've looked at mom, and it's hard because you're in that moment with them for only that short amount of time. And there's so many habits that you're really trying to almost break. Yeah. And part of it is it's not about breaking it with the kid, it's about breaking it with the parent. And I know we sort of diverge into a completely different topic here, but it ties into this sort of overarching culture, I think, around the sport and around soccer. Definitely is prevalent in this area. Whereas again, it feels as if Beestera is very different than that.
I think it's difficult for parents. I really do, because especially if they haven't had experience of the sport, for them to invest 4 figures every year into something, they feel as though they should have a voice, which they're not wrong. But mixed messages are not good for players, especially young kids. So the amount of damage that can be done in the car ride home, I don't think parents understand.
No.
And it might just be a little sentence about the referee was terrible today. Mm-hmm. They hear that in the back seat and they immediately think, that's an excuse. I'm going to use that.
Yep.
So the power of the car ride home, and we're going to write a blog post on this, just to educate the parents, I think, because the power of their words immediately after the game when the tensions are high, and tension shouldn't be high for them, under 10 or under, you know what I mean? But the emotions of the game, they may have just lost. Parents kind of take it personally sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So the car ride home, they need to be very careful about what they're saying. Even if they're just saying it to their significant other, not to the kid.
Mm-hmm.
The kid can also hear and take things on board too. And they're a lot smarter than I think a lot of the parents think they are and what they pick up on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I had a situation this past year. I was coaching the U16 NPL in Australia, and we had a ref who he struggled a lot, and really this has changed a lot throughout my coaching career. I used to be a person that might from time to time say, at this point in my career I don't say anything to refs. I really just don't, because so something happens, we get scored on, shouldn't have happened, given that the ref made the right call. And I have one of the directors of my club up there watching, and he loses his mind, and he's yelling, and we had a heart to heart after, because eventually another play happens, ref reverses the decision, and so we're talking afterwards, and he's like, I don't see that passion from you. I don't see that energy from you. You're not yelling at the referee. You see, when I did it, call gets reversed, and now we come away with a point instead of maybe losing. And I remember just saying to him, I'm like, if I do that, if I go and scream at that referee and lose my official, now, and all these players, whether consciously or subconsciously, look to me. They look to my actions. They look to how I behave and what I do on the touchline. So if I go and do that, all I've said to all of my players is that, whenever anything doesn't go your way, go and absolutely hammer the official. That's all that I've done. And then that bleeds into not even the big moments of a game, right, where it is actually a goal sort of defying decision. It's even the little ones. Yeah, just go hammer him. And that tone, the standards that you set is so huge, I think, for players. And again, it ties into what you were saying with even the communication from the parents or from the other players, from the coaches. All those things, again, subconsciously or consciously, sort of trickle into your brain. And if you're a part of a team where the coach is going to scream at the officials and everyone in the sideline is going to scream at the officials, you're a product of your environment. How are you not going to then scream at the officials? And then if we talk too about how does soccer set you up for the rest of life, okay, so a boss makes a decision, against your candidacy for a position, and it probably wasn't fair. What are you going to go scream in his face? This is what you've been taught now is your reaction to sort of have to things. And so I think it is maybe even more powerful than people recognize how much of an impact, the way in which you communicate in sport can relay into the rest of life.
And since our last conversation, we implemented a booking system, which has freed up a lot of my time. I spoke to Tom Owens to put it on, like, should I do this? I'm really concerned about losing the relationship with the parents, from text messages to an online booking system. If you look at the online booking system where people can, what they want to work on for today, the number one thing that they want to work on is confidence. So how do you improve confidence? One, obviously mastering something gives you more confidence. Doing it in an environment that doesn't really care about mistakes is another way. We had a girl come and train with us the other day who missed a penalty in the semi-final of a game. The team went on to win the semi-final, but she got asked to take a penalty in the final, and she said no. She's 14 years old, and her dad asked me to speak to her in the training session about the weekend and how it went, because it was the lowest point of her playing career. And I've just said, how are you feeling? And she started tearing up. I'm like, talk me through it. What was going on? She just said, confidence zapped. I didn't want to take anything, and I conceded an own goal in the semi-final too. It was a deflection. And I just said to her, look, at the end of the day, I don't want to discredit what we're doing here, but you've played in upstate New York in a tournament that teams travel 20, 30 miles to attend.
Mm-hmm.
You've missed a penalty, so you've failed to kick a bag of wind into a net from 12 yards away. It's not that big of a deal, is it? So again, this brings back these life lessons. In the grand scheme of things, most things with the sport don't really matter unless, and again, winning is a trait too. Like if you can develop that winning mindset, that competitive nature, I'm not saying it's not relevant. Of course, it's a sport, but the how you speak to people, how confident you are, that can all be built within the sport to serve you later on in life, because the majority of the people that we coach are not going to go and be a professional player.
Yeah.
They'd love to, but they're just not. So how can we set them up for success in whatever they want to pursue after their soccer career, playing career is over?
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think too, you have such a unique role where you get to see so many different players from so many different clubs and so many different ages. And it kind of just sparked this idea in me of what are those things? Is that something you see as well in all players? Like so many players currently struggle with their confidence, because I can speak to it from myself and observing it sort of within sessions. I think whether it's a dynamic that's created with them and their coaches, or whether it's, just the environments that they're playing in, I'm not sure. But a lot of players I feel like sort of come into the session with me and they're a bit uneasy, especially if it's a newer player. They're a bit uneasy. They're like, is this a coach it's going to kind of yell at me? Like, what is this a safe spot for me to kind of, and I try and as quickly as possible sort of just like, and be like, we're just kicking a ball around, we're going to have fun. We're going to make mistakes. I'm going to say stupid stuff, like, and trying to get like, and that's why, with players like Adam Jablonka or people that I've worked with a ton, it's nice to get to that point where they kind of have established, all right, this is a safe spot for me to be. And yes, in other environments, it might be a little bit different, but this is where I can come and I can still do the thing I love, but there's not quite the same expectations or pressures on me. I mean, what do you see that? Because you work with so many different players. You see so many players also in like a more personalized basis.
I think confidence, the trend of losing confidence occurs more in the older age groups rather than the younger ones. I think the younger ones are a little fearless. Maybe after the first session they come in, they're a little bit shy, but you give them the speech of, if you don't make a mistake, I've not got a job. So I want to see you make a mistake.
Yeah.
And that just kind of like loosens them up. Great. I think the real issue is losing confidence when you're 16, 17, 18. And I think there's a lot of things that they have to deal with that we didn't have to deal with when we were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
One is social media. And the quote is that comparison is the thief of joy. So if you're comparing yourself to, I didn't know what Brazilians were doing at 16 through social media. I didn't have access to what an American player was training like at 16. I didn't know what a Division 1 player was doing. So just them seeing everyone else online and trying to compare themselves or better what they see is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's how can we, as people that have gone through the journey of a playing career, played in different countries, how can we share our insights to hopefully make them see a different perspective that will help increase their confidence?
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely can see it in some of the older players that we've worked with. And it's sometimes you feel as if the session is less so about technical aspects and more so just about kind of getting them to smile and getting them to find a little bit of that joy again. And I think it's a unique position that we're in where, from, again, we speak about the word of adapting, right? And it's like, not only are you maybe adapting a session for the type of player, the level, the number of players, but also in one session, you may need to be you really need to be a technician and understand how to adjust this player's ability, some specific mistake they might be making. The next session, you might need to really just be a sports psychologist for 30 minutes. And there might be very few things that you even really do soccer-wise, but you're just, we even said it yesterday. My first session of the day after the player left you was he came over to me and we sat on the floor and he cried for about 5-7 minutes.
That's my coaching, I think.
but I think it's such a unique spot to be in, and it's also kind of figuring that out within like that initial sort of assessment of the player. What's their body language like? What's their mood like? What's been going on lately? And all right, where do we need to kind of take this session from there?
We have to wear different hats in the sessions too. Like you've said, I had a parent come up to me the other day and her daughter is coming back from a second ACL injury. And the mum said, she's just losing that motivation to train. Can you have a word with her? And I'm thinking, I've not done my ACL before, let alone twice.
Yeah.
So I can't understand the pain that she's gone through. I don't understand the suffering that she's gone through to come back, not only once, but twice. So I can't relate. What I can do is just paint a bigger picture from an outside perspective and just make her think about a few things. Do you want a better quality of life at 60 or 70? I'm not focused on soccer. I'm focused on, do you want to be in a wheelchair at 60? Like, that is more important than coming back and playing soccer.
Mm-hmm.
So soccer, as much as it's given me and given us, it's not life and death. I know there is a quote out there that says it's much more than that. But for me, it's not. It's just an avenue and a platform that, again, that gives people opportunities to achieve whatever they want to achieve.
Yeah. Is it ever crazy for you to think, back to when we were 18, 19, 20 years old and how much we lived and breathed the game to now be in a position this time on and be saying, maybe we shouldn't take soccer so seriously, huh? Maybe we should relax a little bit.
Like, honestly, people come up to me and they say, did you watch this game yesterday? I'm like, I can't remember the last time I watched the game. And it's sad in a way, because as much as it's given me, when I get home now, because it's every day thinking about the sport. When I get home, Gabby, my wife, she'll have a game on, and then I'll be like, how was it? Then I'll watch the final 20 minutes or something. But I won't sit down and watch a 90-minute game, because I think I could be spending my time doing this for the business.
Mm-hmm.
So it's working out. Obviously, there is a benefit to watching the game and how it can apply to coaching and different things that are being done in the game. But yeah, it's just I've lost not the passion of watching, but
just different now.
Yeah.
I understand that completely. If we talk about where, we've talked a lot about where we've come from when it comes to Beestera. Where do you kind of see the future going? What's the vision? What's still on the vision board?
Mike wants to expand camps. No shot there. He's
Are we going at some point? Are we going global? Like, what's the? I would not be surprised if fast forward 5 years, all of a sudden we're doing Beestera camps in like Singapore.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised either. He's got the bit between the teeth right now, and he's really motivated to expand. It's just maneuvering a plan to make that happen. So that's him. For me, I would love to expand private training into 1 or 2 more local locations, bringing on more staff members, giving them the opportunity to, coach and do what they want to do. Coaching's the next best thing to play, in my opinion. So if that provides opportunities for coaches to come on board under the umbrella of Beestera, great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really focused on the online stuff, because I think we've built something really special here in person for every age, every ability. I think there's so many coaches and players out there that could benefit from what we are teaching here and what we're doing here. So a big goal of mine is to expand and an online platform that showcases our weekly things, like what Curtis and Tucker are doing for team training, what Mike's doing at camps, what we're doing for private sessions, and then just building something out from there.
Who's the audience for the online platform? Is it players? Is it coaches? Is it all of the above?
All of the above, and parents too. I think parents need education as well, because sometimes they're lost. Some clubs may not give them the information that they need, such as like sideline behavior. We spoke about it before. From a coaching perspective, I feel as though there's so many different coaching online platforms out there where they provide session plans and you can watch the session, and they're unbelievable. Some of them are unbelievable. If I'm a coach, though, I'm looking at the player that's in those sessions at an Arsenal academy or a Barcelona academy, and I'm going, yeah, they aren't my kids.
Yeah.
So I think what we're trying to do now is build a platform for coaches where they can go in and say, yeah, that's more representative of the players that I'm training. This is more realistic. And giving them education to hopefully grow the game in this country. I think the 2026 World Cup is going to be enormous.
Yeah.
So it's just gearing up for that, to be honest.
Yeah. Along the lines of that timeline piece, is there anything you can say in terms of when people can expect it, or are we still sort of in the trenches of designing?
Still in the trenches of designing. I've got a goal to have it released by the summer.
Okay.
And then we'll just see how it goes from there. It's something that I'm really enjoying designing. All the coaches in the office are on board with. You've got Curtis and Tucker doing the teams, Mike and Joshua creating the camp animations, and it's so many different things that are going on. It's down to myself and Lane to embed that into the platform and make it user friendly.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. So I always like to ask this. It's been my new favorite thing in the pod, kind of asking this 3-part question here at the end, and we can frame this in the context of sort of your journey, Beestera's journey, however you want to take it. Because what I love about doing this show is sort of capturing just the idea of story, because I think it's so powerful. And us, for example, today, us being able to sort of get these ideas across of a knowledge that we have, but doing it in a way of sort of telling stories about, my experiences, your experiences growing a business, I think is powerful. So if we use the context of story here, what would be the chapter that you are currently in?
Personally, since our last conversation, I've got married. So it's learning to be the best husband I can be while maintaining a business that is looking to grow and expand and be sustainable. So that is where we're currently at, or where I'm currently at. So
difficult at all to be able to balance, it's a topic that you'll hear Curtis and I discuss, but balancing sort of taking on so much in the business and also really setting boundaries might not be the best word, but we can use it just in the sense of trying to also keep a personal life,
I think boundaries are really important. In our last conversation, I'd probably been on one date with my wife. So that was when we just started talking. At that time, I was Beestera 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 6 a.m. No matter the time, it's just fully Beestera. Now I have a duty to switch off to make sure that I'm present whenever I'm with Gabby. She's a teacher, so we're literally on opposite timelines. She's off in the summer, and our summer's the busiest.
Yeah.
She works until 3:00. That's when we start sessions.
Yeah.
So making sure whenever I am home, I am present and I'm attentive to, her and her day and how it's been, and making sure that I can be the best that I can be for her too.
Yeah. Yeah. If we talk to the chapters that you're looking forward to writing and what you hope to still write in the future, what would you see that being?
Just the continued growth of the business, bringing on people that represent the brand well and onboarding them and letting them do their thing. I think one thing that all three, me, Matt, and Mike, have been able to do is trust people to do the job and not worry about it anymore. I don't want to micromanage camps. The only thing I have to do with camps is put each one on the website and make a flyer every now and again. Mm-hmm. I trust Mike to build a staff that is capable of representing the brand well and being able to expand and sustain through that.
Yeah. Last part of it is, whenever someone will think of a book that, you have to read this book, right? And they kind of give you the 1 to 2 sentences why you have to read this book. Somebody picks up the James Beeston book and they've read it and they want to give it to someone else and say, you have to read this book. James wrote it. What do you want them to say about it?
Ooh. I think it's something that's been present throughout the conversation today, but he, along with his friends, managed to build a platform that provided opportunities to people, whether that's players playing in college, players playing professionally, players that quit playing at a certain age, but develop those life lessons that will hold them well throughout the rest of their life, or whether that's coaches that we're bringing on 15 international coaches from England this summer, giving them opportunities to come to the States. I think 12 out of the 15 have never been to America before. So we're providing an opportunity to them, providing an opportunity to full-time staff members to make a career out of the sport. So I think if there was a book to be written, it's him and his friends built a platform that gave people opportunity.
How special is that as well to be able to say that too, like him and his friends? Because I think that's something that's so unique too. Like, yes, there's a business partner relationship to all of this, but these are also the people that you kind of spent your formative years with and more or less grew up with and are still this huge part of your life.
Yeah, I don't really class them as business partners. It's just we're friends.
Yeah.
We've always had the agreement if money got in the way of anything, then we just shut down. We just shut down the business. So that's always been something that we've spoken about. But as I've said earlier on in the conversation, we've never had a disagreement, and I don't think we'll ever have a disagreement over that. So it is really nice to, like you said, say it's friends that continue to grow and learn and expand.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate your time. This has been a lot of fun. Glad to be able to do this in person, especially a couple years down the road. And I think it'll be really interesting for people to, now they get to see your whole story in the sense of where you've come from in your early stage within the game and now to, the past couple of years as someone who's been a part of it and someone who's also watched it at certain points from afar. It's been impressive to see. So, I said this to Curtis yesterday. I'm incredibly proud of you. I'm incredibly proud of what you've been able to build and what you've been able to do for this community. It's truly, it's inspiring. I mean that, I do.
The feeling's mutual, mate. Obviously, to see your journey and to take risks and go and play in a different country and to continue to build the podcast. I am a frequent listener, so just to see your development from back in our first conversation to now has been inspiring too. So keep doing your thing.
Yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe if people have heard just this one, I don't know if they should go back because they'll be like, wait, back
this
then,
the same interviewer?
Seems like you took a couple English lessons since this one. All right. Good stuff, man.
That is it for this week's episode. Thank you to James for kicking off the Beestera series that we're going to be running. Looking forward to introducing you guys to so many of the staff members, so many cool, interesting stories from those who work at Beestera. It's been great connecting with these people over the years and getting to work with them side by side. So happy to reintroduce you to James and introduce you to the rest of the staff in the coming weeks and months. As I mentioned at the top, make sure if you're interested in the consultancy services with myself, you're looking to book a call with me, go ahead and do that. You'll be able to schedule a call with me, and we'll get to talk about what your career goals might be in the world of football. Looking forward to connecting with all of you in that regard. Thank you to all those of you who have listened and watched and continue to support the show. And I can't wait to see you guys on the next episode. All right? Peace.